The bus hissed to a stop on 125th Street and Lenox Avenue. It was a cold March morning in 1985, the kind where even the wind felt like it carried judgment. Mabel Jenkins stepped down carefully, clutching a battered brown suitcase in one hand and a broom in the other. A long-handled, well-worn push broom tied with a red ribbon near the bristles. The ribbon was frayed. The broom was clean. She wore a modest wool coat, olive green, buttoned to the top, and a faded scarf around her head. She moved slowly with purpose. No jewelry, no cell phone, just that suitcase, that broom, and a look of quiet knowing in her eyes. Nobody noticed her at first. Harlem was always full of people coming and going, looking for a start, a job, a miracle. Mabel didn't look like someone chasing dreams. She looked like someone sent to do something that had already been decided. She didn't stop at the employment office, didn't check into a shelter. Instead, she walked 4 blocks to Jefferson Elementary School, a red brick building nestled between 2 apartment complexes and a corner store that sold both textbooks and lottery tickets. It was still early. The janitors were just unlocking the doors. "Excuse me, baby," she said softly to the younger custodian, a man named Clarence, who was sweeping salt off the steps. "Y'all hiring?" Clarence looked her up and down. She wasn't young, not old, but she had a stillness to her. A woman who had seen things. "Maybe," he said. "For what?" "Whatever needs done." "You mean like cleaning? Janitorial?" "I mean like sweeping," she replied, nodding toward the broom in her hand. He chuckled. "Ma'am, I think we got all the sweepers we need." "That's all right," she said. "I can start outside." Clarence, unsure what else to say, let her be. He watched as she walked over to the far edge of the school sidewalk, where old leaves had gathered from the previous season, and began to sweep. Not with urgency, not with flair, just steady, consistent strokes, as if each leaf mattered, as if she were erasing something more than dirt. That first day, Mabel didn't speak to anyone else. She swept the entire front sidewalk, the back alley, and the fence line. She pulled weeds from the cracks in the pavement and removed broken glass left from a late-night fight. When the children arrived, she stepped aside, nodded, and whispered, "Good morning," to each of them. That night, she slept in a church basement 3 blocks away. The next morning, she came back, and again the next day, and the one after that. By the end of the second week, Principal Rollins finally called her into his office. "Ms. Jenkins," he said, adjusting his thick glasses, "we appreciate your help, but we didn't hire you." She nodded slowly. "I didn't ask to be hired. You're not on payroll. There's no insurance, no benefits. We can't." "I don't need much," she replied. "Just a place to sweep." He studied her for a long moment. "Why the school?" She looked toward the window, where children were chasing each other with backpacks bigger than their bodies. "Because they're small," she said, "and this world is heavy." That was the end of it. The principal signed a waiver. The school gave her an official volunteer badge. And from that day forward, Mabel Jenkins became the first person anyone saw at Jefferson Elementary every morning. At 5:30 a.m., she would arrive. Rain, snow, heat, didn't matter. She swept, she greeted, and she listened, always listening. By autumn, the children began to smile when they saw her. "Good morning, Mama Mabel," they'd shout as they passed. Some of them started hugging her legs. Some would offer her candy or stickers. She always took them and kept them in her coat pocket like treasure. The older kids avoided eye contact at first, too cool to say hello. But she didn't seem to mind. She just kept sweeping. One day, when the school nurse asked what she used to do before coming to Harlem, Mabel simply replied, "I lived." That was all she ever said about her past. There were rumors. Some said she was a widow. Others guessed she used to be a maid for someone important. A few teachers whispered that maybe she had been a teacher herself or even a nurse. One janitor claimed she'd seen Mabel at a civil rights march back in the 60s. But no one knew for sure, and Mabel didn't tell. All they knew was that she kept coming, day after day, week after week, sweeping the school's perimeter like it was sacred ground. By the end of her first year, she wasn't just the woman with the broom. She was the guardian of the sidewalk, the unofficial greeter, the quiet watcher of troubled children and distracted parents. The one who saw everything without ever saying much. And then, in the fall of 1986, a boy showed up behind the fence. Alone, silent, and shivering. Mabel paused her sweeping. She looked up, and everything began to change. The chain-link fence behind Jefferson Elementary was where the forgotten things ended up. Crumpled juice boxes, stray soccer balls, and, that morning in October 1986, a boy named Miguel. Mabel noticed him the second she turned the corner of the school's back alley. He was small for his age, maybe 8, his knees drawn to his chest and a sweatshirt pulled tight over his head. One shoelace was missing, and his backpack looked like it had been found in a trash bin. He didn't flinch when she approached. Mabel didn't say anything. She didn't ask his name or why he wasn't inside. She simply sat down on the curb a few feet away, placing her broom beside her like a companion. She pulled out a small paper bag from her coat pocket, the kind you pack lunch in, and opened it slowly. Inside were 2 peanut butter sandwiches, a red apple, and a crumpled napkin with handwriting. She took a bite from one sandwich, chewed quietly, then, after a moment, held the other one out toward him without looking. He didn't move, but when she stood up and walked away 10 minutes later, the sandwich was gone. The next morning, he was there again. Same spot, same silence, same guarded eyes. She didn't speak, just sat nearby and offered another sandwich. This time, she added a small carton of chocolate milk and a folded note. "You're not invisible. I see you." He read it, slowly, then tucked it into the waistband of his jeans like it was worth something. By the end of the week, Miguel began to say one-word things. "Thanks," or "you came," sometimes just "hey." She learned his mother worked nights and sometimes didn't come home until mid-morning. That his older brother had been arrested last year. That the man in their house didn't like extra mouths at the breakfast table. He didn't trust adults, especially not ones who wanted information. But Mabel didn't ask. She only offered her presence and her sandwich. One day, Miguel brought her a small gift. A plastic toy car with one missing wheel. He didn't explain it, just handed it over and sat beside her. Mabel took it as if it were made of gold. "This one's fast," she said, turning it gently in her hands. He grinned for the first time. Just a flash. But it was enough. 2 weeks later, Miguel finally walked through the school gate. Principal Rollins noticed and nodded at Mabel, who stood nearby with her broom. "You helped that boy more than the counselor ever could," he said. She didn't reply, just swept a few leaves from the front step and whispered, "Sometimes all they need is someone steady." In the following months, Miguel became a regular. He didn't ace his classes, didn't turn into a model student overnight, but he showed up. He listened, and when kids picked on others, he stood in the way. One morning in spring, Mabel found a drawing folded inside her lunch bag, a stick figure of her with a giant broom and a red heart above her head. Miguel had signed it, "Mama Mabel, you sweep sadness away." She kept it in her notebook for the next 30 years. Years passed. Miguel moved on to middle school, then high school. He stopped coming around like kids do, but every now and then, Mabel would see his face in the crowd on the street. He always nodded, always gave her a little wave. And one day, years later, long after he disappeared into the rhythm of the city, he returned, taller, wearing a community college hoodie and carrying a bag of groceries. He didn't say much, just handed her a container of peanut butter sandwiches and said, "Thought you might like a break." Then he walked off, and Mabel cried for the first time in a long while. Miguel was only the first. In the years to come, dozens of fence children would come and go. Some hungry, some angry, some silent and bruised by things they didn't have words for. And Mabel greeted each of them the same way, with sandwiches, soft silence, and a place beside her on the curb. By now, the neighborhood had noticed. "She's not just a sweeper," one teacher said. "She's a sentinel," said another. "A saint with a broom." But Mabel refused all titles. She swept because it gave her a way to stay still while the world moved too fast. She showed up because someone needed to, and the children came to believe that as long as she was there, With that ribbon-tied broom and that small paper lunch bag, everything might be okay. By the early 90s, Mabel Jenkins had swept the sidewalks of Jefferson Elementary for nearly a decade. To most, she was simply Mama Mabel, the soft-spoken woman who wore the same green coat each day and nodded to the world like it was an old friend. But to the children who lingered at the edges, the ones who didn't fit in, who didn't raise their hands, or who flinched when someone shouted, she was something more. She was the steady place. So when Andrew Martinez enrolled in 5th grade during the fall of 1992, Mabel saw him right away, not just with her eyes, but with that deeper knowing that only time and pain can teach. Andrew wasn't like Miguel. He didn't hide behind fences or skip school. He showed up every morning. But he came with a fury in his eyes that seemed to search for a reason to ignite. He was pale, lanky, and walked with his fists already clenched. His sneakers were scuffed, and his backpack was torn near the zipper. The other boys steered clear of him. The girls whispered. Teachers braced themselves when he raised his hand. Not because he was curious, but because it usually came with a challenge. He rolled his eyes during reading time, slapped books off his desk, called his math teacher a coward when asked to sit down. By November, the school counselor had already written 2 behavioral reports. His record mentioned emotional instability and unpredictable outbursts. What it didn't mention, what no one had asked, was why. But Mabel never needed to ask. She'd heard it in his footsteps, the stomp that tried too hard. She'd seen it in the way he kicked at the gravel when no one was looking. And she'd noticed, always, that after each outburst, he lingered by the front gate before leaving, as if waiting for someone to stop him, or ask him to stay. One Tuesday afternoon, Mabel watched him walk home late. He moved slower than usual. The school day had ended an hour ago, and most students had already cleared out. She followed him from a distance, sweeping leaves along the edge of the yard. When he turned the corner, she glanced down and saw something on the ground near where he'd stood. A torn envelope addressed to his mother. It had been stepped on, but part of the return address was still visible. NYS Department of Corrections. She didn't pick it up, just stared at it for a long moment, her hands tightening on the broom handle. That night, she wrote a note. Not a long one, not flowery, just 9 words, written in a blocky, almost childlike script. Your father's mistakes don't have to be yours. The next morning, Mabel arrived earlier than usual. She found Andrew's locker. It wasn't hard. His was the one with black marker scratched into the side and a broken hinge. When no one was looking, she slipped the note through the slat at the top. Then she swept the hallway as if nothing had happened. What happened after wasn't immediate. Andrew didn't transform overnight. He still argued, still scowled, still shoved his way past people in the hallway. But something shifted. He started sitting through class without being asked. He stopped storming out of the library. One morning, a teacher noticed him helping a younger boy pick up spilled crayons. And then one Friday he came to school early. Earlier than even some of the janitors. Mabel was outside, as usual, sweeping the steps. He walked up to her, didn't say a word, just stood there awkwardly for a second before handing her something. A crumpled granola bar. I didn't eat breakfast, he mumbled. But you can have it. She took it with both hands and nodded slowly. Thank you, baby. That was it. No discussion of the note. No apology. Just a quiet offering. After that, Andrew began to change. He joined the after-school art club. He wrote a poem that won a district contest. He made friends. By spring, he was unrecognizable to most of the staff. To Mabel, though, he was exactly as he'd always been. Just a boy looking for space to grow in peace. Years later, long after he graduated, a letter arrived at Jefferson Elementary addressed simply to the woman with the broom. Inside was a photo of a young man in a cap and gown. On the back, scrawled in the same blocky handwriting she had once used, your words made a door. I walked through it. A.M. Mabel kept that photo tucked into her notebook, just behind Miguel's drawing. She never told anyone about the note. Not the principal, not the teachers, and certainly not Andrew, because she believed that true kindness never demands recognition. It just is, like breath. We're or sunlight, and still every morning she swept. Tamara Johnson arrived at Jefferson Elementary in the fall of 1999 like a storm with no warning. 11 years old and already wearing the scowl of someone twice her age. She didn't smile, didn't make friends, and didn't care who liked her. She wore a leather jacket 2 sizes too big, her braids tied with red beads that clicked when she turned too fast. Her eyes scanned every hallway like she was sizing up threats. She didn't whisper. She barked. She didn't ask. She dared. On her second day, she slammed a library book shut and snapped at a teacher. This story fake anyway. A week later, she threw a plastic lunch tray across the cafeteria. By the end of the month, her file already held 5 behavioral write-ups. She's got rage, the guidance counselor said. She's just acting out, the math teacher added. She needs a special school, someone muttered in the break room. But Mabel Jenkins didn't say anything. She simply watched. Mabel had seen children like Tamara before, the kind whose anger wasn't wild, but crafted, built like armor, polished until no kindness could get through. Each morning, Tamara walked past Mabel without so much as a glance. Not even a grunt. Other kids said good morning, Mama Mabel, or gave her a quick hug. Tamara stared straight ahead. And yet, Mabel noticed how the girl's gaze flicked sideways each day. Just a flash. As if checking to see if Mabel was still there. She always was. The incident happened on a Wednesday. Late October. The air smelled of burnt leaves and cold metal. Tamara had gotten into an argument with another girl in her class. No fists, just words. But words were Tamara's sharpest weapon. You don't have a real daddy, she spat. Your mama buys you shoes with food stamps and still can't feed you right. The girl cried. The teacher yelled. Tamara was sent to the office. But instead of going, she bolted. Down the back hall. Out the side door. Into the alley behind the gym. By the time anyone noticed, it was too late. She'd taken a rock and hurled it through the bottom pane of a school window. The glass shattered with a piercing crack. Then silence. Tamara stood alone, fists trembling. And Mabel, who had been sweeping the courtyard, turned the corner and saw it all. They stood facing each other, 2 figures in the chill of late fall. One with rage burning behind her eyes, the other holding a broom, calm as still water. Tamara clenched her jaw. Go ahead, she said, voice tight. Tell them. Call the cops. I don't care. Mabel didn't speak. Instead, she bent down slowly, picked up the largest shard of glass, and placed it gently in a nearby trash bin. Tamara stared, confused. Then Mabel looked her in the eye and said, quietly, you cold? Tamara blinked. What? Mabel nodded toward the wind blowing through the alley. Your jacket ain't warm enough. Come inside. The girl hesitated. No lecture. No threat. Just the offer. She followed. Inside the maintenance room, Mabel poured hot water into 2 mugs from a thermos she kept for chilly mornings. She dropped in a cinnamon tea bag. Tamara's smelled faintly like vanilla. They sat in silence. Tamara didn't speak for a long time. Then she muttered, I didn't mean to hit the glass. Mabel stirred her tea. Didn't look like it hit itself. Tamara tensed. So you were gonna tell? No. The girl narrowed her eyes. Why not? Mabel looked at her softly. 'Cause you already told yourself. And just like that, the fire in Tamara's shoulders dropped. Not all of it, but enough. I hate this place, she whispered. I hate school. I hate everyone pretending like they care. Mabel sipped her tea. Pretending's exhausting. Tamara blinked. You're not gonna say, but we do care? Nope. Why not? 'Cause I don't say what folks should believe. I wait till they see it. Tamara didn't answer. But she didn't leave either. She finished her tea. And when she got up to go, she didn't say goodbye. She just placed the empty mug carefully by the sink. The next morning, Tamara walked past Mabel as usual. But this time, she paused at the gate. Didn't look directly at her. Just said that tea was kinda okay. Then kept walking. A week later, a janitor found a folded paper on the staff desk in the maintenance room. It was unsigned, scribbled in pencil, and had eraser marks all over it. It read, sometimes I throw things, 'cause I don't know how not to. But I ain't broken. Just cracked up a bit. Mabel smiled when she read it. She tucked it in her notebook, behind Andrew's photo and Miguel's drawing. By winter, Tamara was calmer. Still sharp-tongued, still fiery, but grounded now. She joined the debate club. She started checking out books from the library again. And one snowy afternoon in December, she brought Mabel a scarf. "I knitted it in home EC," she said, shoving it into Mabel's hands. "Don't get all emotional." It was lopsided. The yarn was uneven. The color was an odd shade of orange. Mabel wore it every day that winter. She never mentioned the broken window again. Tamara never apologized. And that was fine, because some children don't need lectures or punishments. They need space, warmth, and a woman who sees past shattered glass. The spring of 2003 came late to Harlem. Snow lingered longer than usual, and the trees in front of Jefferson Elementary wore bare limbs well into April. But even in the gray chill, Mabel Jenkins swept as she always had, slow, methodical, humming softly beneath her breath. That was when she first saw Darius. He came on a Monday morning, walking behind a social worker in a gray trench coat. His backpack looked almost new, his jeans were clean, and his hair was neatly parted. But something about him seemed faded, like an image left too long in the sun. He was 8 years old, small for his age, and utterly silent. Not shy, silent. No hello, no questions, no eye contact. He didn't flinch or fidget. He simply moved where he was told, sat where directed, and stared ahead as if waiting for the day to end before it began. "He hasn't spoken since November," a teacher whispered later that week. "Not one word. Not even a whisper." "Trauma," said the school counselor, her voice heavy. "He saw things. CPS took him out of the home, but it's like his voice stayed behind." Teachers tried gentle encouragement. Specialists introduced picture boards and therapeutic play. But nothing worked. Darius didn't act out. He didn't misbehave. He just wasn't there, as if he were moving through the world behind a pane of glass. But Mabel noticed something the others didn't. Each morning, when she swept the front steps, Darius would glance sideways as he passed. Only for a second. Just long enough to register her presence. That was all she needed. The next morning, Mabel brought 2 muffins. One she ate. The other she placed on the low wall beside the gate. Just before Darius arrived. He walked past it. Didn't look. The next day, she did the same. A different muffin. On the 3rd day, he slowed. Paused. Then moved on. Day 5, he picked it up. Didn't eat it in front of her. Just slipped it into his pocket. She never acknowledged it. Never pointed. Never smiled too long. Only swept. On the 2nd week, she placed a small rock next to the muffin. Flat and smooth, with a flower painted on one side. The following morning, the rock was gone too. They never spoke. She never expected it. But every day, the rhythm continued. Muffin, rock, sweep. By week 4, Mabel began to leave simple objects. A feather, a marble, a tiny folded paper crane, always paired with the muffin, always in the same spot, and always quietly taken. One rainy Tuesday, Mabel found something left behind for her. A small piece of cardboard. On it, drawn with crayon, was a stick figure of a woman holding a broom, and beside her, a smaller figure with no mouth. Just a small black line where the heart should be. Mabel touched it gently and folded it into her notebook. She understood. He wasn't mute. He was mourning. The next day, she left a tiny envelope with the muffin. Inside was a note. It read, "You're not broken. You're growing. No name, no pressure, just truth." By mid-May, something began to shift. Darius started drawing in class. First random shapes, then actual images, trees, faces, animals. He was still silent, but now he responded with nods. He held doors. He helped a younger student tie a shoe. Teachers were stunned. "He's warming up," the counselor said. "It's a miracle." But Mabel knew it wasn't a miracle. It was time, and attention, and muffins. Then, one morning, it happened. As Mabel swept the corner near the gate, Darius stopped in front of her. No warning, no glance away. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded note. He handed it to her with both hands, as if it were fragile. Then he said, barely audible, like wind between leaves, "Thank you." It was his first word in 6 months. Mabel didn't gasp, didn't cry. She just nodded and said softly, "You're welcome, baby." And they stood there, the two of them, for a moment longer than the world allowed. The note he gave her said, "Sometimes it's quiet in me, but you made it less scary." She added it to her notebook, right behind Tamara's poem and Andrew's photo. By the end of the year, Darius was speaking full sentences again. He laughed during recess. He raised his hand during reading time. And once, during an assembly, he stood up and read a poem aloud to the entire 5th grade. When the applause ended, his eyes scanned the crowd and found Mabel, standing near the back with her broom, nodding once, slow and proud. He smiled, and she swept. The vandalism happened on a Saturday night in early February 2010. The kind of night where winter winds pushed through alleyways like warnings, and the moon hung low, distant and cold. Sometime between midnight and dawn, a group of teenagers shattered 5 large windows at Jefferson Elementary, 3 at the front entrance, 2 along the side hallway near the cafeteria. Shards of glass blanketed the sidewalk, glinting beneath the flickering yellow light from the school's old street lamp. Nobody called the police. No alarm went off. No one noticed, except Mabel. She always arrived early, but that morning she arrived earlier still. Maybe something in her bones knew. Maybe the wind had whispered. Or maybe, after nearly 25 years, she could sense when something had gone wrong before she even turned the corner. When she saw the damage, she stopped walking. Her eyes scanned the jagged remnants. Glass teeth jutted from broken frames. Graffiti, rushed and crude, had been spray-painted across the brick. Failure zone in bold, black letters. She didn't gasp, didn't call anyone. She set her broom down slowly and pulled off her gloves. Then, with careful hands, she got to work. There was no safety tape, no fluorescent vest, just a thin, elderly woman with 2 trash bags and a plastic dustpan. She swept for nearly 3 hours. The wind cut at her scarf. Her hands bled in 3 places from catching glass. At one point, she slipped on black ice and landed hard on her hip, but she pushed herself up, dusted off, and kept going. By 6:45 a.m., the sidewalk was clear. By 7:15, she had wiped off the spray paint using vinegar, elbow grease, and quiet determination. And by 7:30, when the first teacher arrived, Mabel was leaning on her broom like nothing had happened. "Morning, baby," she said with a nod. Principal Hollins arrived a few minutes later and stopped cold at the door. "Good God," he murmured, looking at the boarded windows. "When did this happen?" Mabel didn't look up from sweeping the remaining dust near the curb. "Sometime last night," she said simply. He stepped over the spot where the graffiti had been scrubbed away. "Did you?" "Just cleaned up a little," she said. "Didn't want the babies seeing it first thing." The principal looked down at her hands. They were nicked, red, swollen from the cold. "I could have called facilities. We have procedures." "Sometimes," she said, "procedures come too late." That day, none of the students noticed anything unusual. Just a few plywood boards covering windows, a faint scent of vinegar in the air. But they didn't see the broken glass. They didn't see the hateful words. Mabel had made sure of that. The principal tried to convince her to rest the next day, but she returned again at 5:30 sharp. Same coat, same broom, same soft hum under her breath. Later that week, a custodian found something taped to the inside of the main door. It was a simple piece of paper, scribbled with a child's handwriting and no name. "Some people break stuff. Some people build. I'm glad you build." Mabel smiled and folded it gently into her notebook, just behind Darius's note. A few days after that, she received an envelope in her locker. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a gift card to the grocery store down the street and a folded napkin with only 4 words. "We saw you. Thank you." No one ever came forward to claim responsibility for the vandalism. Police never investigated. The incident wasn't mentioned in the school newsletter. But slowly, little things began to change. More teachers arrived early. More parents nodded when they passed Mabel on the steps. The custodian who used to avoid small talk started bringing her tea. One first-grade teacher began leaving flowers on the railing every Friday, always a different kind. Daffodils, lilies, tulips. Mabel never said a word, just carried them home, pressed some between pages of her notebook. That spring, the principal asked if she'd like a plaque mounted near the front gate in her honor. She refused. Plaques don't sweep the walk, she said. Instead, she asked for something else. Let the kids plant a flower bed right here, she said, pointing to the empty space where the graffiti once was. Make it theirs. Give them something to grow. By June, that space bloomed with marigolds, daisies, and lavender. Each flower labeled by student hands with names like Hope, Brave, Strong, and Still Growing. They named the garden the Quiet Patch. The board never replaced the windows with glass. They left them boarded until the next budget cycle. Mabel didn't mind. She said they reminded people that something had been broken, but also that someone had cared enough to clean it up before the world noticed. In the summer of 2015, the Jefferson neighborhood changed overnight. It happened on a Thursday. Just after sunrise, unmarked vans rolled through the streets. Agents in navy jackets knocked on doors, not asking questions but demanding papers. There was shouting, crying, then silence. By 8 a.m., 5 families were gone. One of them belonged to a 6th-grade girl named Selena Rojas. Her parents, both undocumented, had walked her to school every day since kindergarten. Her mother packed her lunch with handwritten notes inside, and her father always waited outside the gate until she disappeared through the doors. Selena loved reading, especially poetry. She wanted to be a teacher, but that Thursday she didn't show up for class. She didn't show up Friday either. The teachers assumed she had been taken with her parents. But Mabel knew better. It was the faint clatter of a metal lid that gave it away. On Saturday morning, while sweeping the alley behind the cafeteria, Mabel heard the noise. A trash can rattling softly in the corner, too deliberate for the wind. She paused. Someone there? She called gently. No answer. She stepped forward, broom in hand, and slowly peered behind the dumpster. There, curled into herself, was Selena. Her clothes were streaked with dirt, her hair matted, her knees pressed to her chest. She looked up, but didn't speak. Mabel crouched slowly, her knees protesting. Hey baby, she whispered. Selena didn't move. Mabel noticed a crumpled backpack beside her, a granola bar, an empty water bottle, and a photo, Selena's school picture, torn at the corner. I've been wondering where you were, Mabel said softly. Selena opened her mouth, but no sound came. Tears did. Mabel reached into her coat and pulled out a peanut butter sandwich, wrapped neatly in wax paper. You eat this, she said. Then we'll get you cleaned up. Mabel didn't take her to the office, didn't call the police. Instead, she walked her, quietly, 2 blocks down to a small, narrow building behind a laundromat. There was no sign, just a painted red door. Inside, a woman with graying braids and tired eyes opened the door. She didn't ask questions. Mabel, she said, stepping aside. You need the usual? Mabel nodded. She just needs a safe place. For now. The woman smiled at Selena, who stood behind Mabel like a shadow. We got space. That was how Selena entered the hidden network Mabel had been nurturing for years. Most people thought Mabel lived paycheck to paycheck. After all, she never wore new clothes, never took vacations, walked everywhere. What they didn't know was that Mabel had opened a quiet bank account back in the late 90s. Into it, she'd funneled small donations, half her wages, and every tip, gift card, or Goodwill envelope she ever received. She called it the Good Morning Fund. It wasn't registered, it wasn't public, but it was powerful, and it had helped more children than any government program ever knew. Through partnerships with church shelters, retired nurses, and 2 school bus drivers who owed Mabel their lives, the fund provided food, emergency housing, tutoring, therapy, and, when needed, legal counsel. She never took credit. She just kept sweeping. Selena stayed in the shelter for 2 weeks while relatives from another state were located. In the meantime, Mabel visited her every day after her morning shift, bringing books, clean socks, fruit cups, and once, a small potted plant. It needs sun, she told Selena. Just like you. The day Selena left, she hugged Mabel for the first time. You didn't have to help me, she whispered. Mabel smiled. That's where you're wrong. Years later, Selena would return. Grown now, wearing a blazer and glasses, her hair pinned neatly behind her ears. She was speaking at a youth immigration summit. When the crowd applauded, she reached into her bag and pulled out something small. A cracked photo, faded by time. My parents gave me this the morning they were taken, she told the audience. But the person who helped me survive wasn't in the picture. She found me in the dark. She never asked questions. She gave me food, safety, and a plant. The crowd chuckled. I'm here today because someone with a broom saw me. Afterward, she visited Jefferson Elementary. It was summer break. The gates were locked. But Mabel was still there, sweeping flower petals from the sidewalk like always. Selena stood at the gate. I still have the plant, she said. Mabel looked up, smiling softly. It bloomed yet? Last year. Mabel nodded. Told you. They stood there for a while, the old woman and the former girl behind the dumpster. No words were needed. Mabel never told anyone about the Good Morning Fund. Not even the principal. She believed that charity was like prayer, most powerful when done in silence. But the children knew. And more importantly, they remembered. The winter of 2017 crept in softly, its first snow falling like a secret across Harlem. Jefferson Elementary stood as it always had, brick and stubborn. Its front steps swept clean before sunrise by the same hands that had done so for over 30 years. Mabel Jenkins was slower now. Her knees ached, and her fingers curled stiffly when the cold set in. But she still arrived each morning with her broom in hand and her coat buttoned tight against the wind. She never complained, never asked for less. She simply adjusted. The children still greeted her with smiles and hugs, some now taller than she was, some bringing their own kids to the very school she once watched them walk into with untied shoes and lunchboxes too big for their hands. They called her Mama Mabel, but none of them truly knew how deep her memory ran. Until the day the notebook was found. It happened by accident. A substitute teacher, Ms. Rivers, had been asked to supervise dismissal one icy afternoon. Wanting to stay out of the wind, she stepped into the maintenance closet beside the side entrance to warm up. She didn't notice the old box on the shelf at first. It was pushed to the back, hidden beneath a stack of folded rags. But when she did, curiosity tugged. Inside was a cloth-bound notebook, worn at the edges, its cover smudged with years of fingerprints and dust. The pages inside were filled, every line handwritten in tight cursive, no wasted space. Ms. Rivers flipped to a random entry. October 3, 1991, Jerome sat on the curb with a ripped jacket. Left him one from the lost and found with a cookie in the pocket. He smiled. She turned the page. May 8, 2005, Sasha got quiet after her brother's arrest. Brought her sidewalk chalk and let her draw hearts until recess ended. Another. November 17, 1999. Tamara screamed at a teacher again. Left her tea and a note. Still proud of you, even on your loud days. Ms. Rivers didn't move for nearly half an hour. Later that evening, she brought the notebook to Principal Hollins's office. I didn't mean to pry, she said, placing it gently on his desk. But I think you should see this. He opened it. Read one entry, then another, then kept going. By the end of the hour, he sat back, eyes glassy. She never told anyone. About what? Ms. Rivers asked. He closed the notebook slowly. About everything. The next morning, Principal Hollins waited by the front gate for Mabel. She arrived as usual, broom in hand, scarf tucked under her chin. I found something, he said quietly. Something you've been keeping. Mabel didn't blink. I was gonna burn it when I retired. He raised an eyebrow. Why? It was just for me, she replied. So I wouldn't forget them. They walked together that morning, slow and quiet. Hollins didn't ask any more questions. And Mabel didn't offer more than she needed to. But word spread as it does. And soon others wanted to see the notebook. Mabel resisted at first, until she realized something. They weren't asking to praise her. They were asking to remember themselves. So she allowed a copy to be made, its names redacted where needed but its stories left intact. And when former students read it, something happened. Miguel, now a youth mentor, said, "I thought nobody saw me. I guess I was wrong." Andrew, now a teacher, whispered, "That note in the locker? I thought it was an angel." Tamara, fierce as ever and now a spoken-word poet, cried for the first time in years. And Darius, now a quiet counselor, simply said, "She gave me my voice back." The notebook became a mirror showing people who they were and who they had become. A chronicle of grace. Mabel still refused interviews. When a journalist called, she hung up. "I didn't write it for the world," she told Hollins. "I wrote it so I wouldn't let go of any of them too soon." But the world was already listening. A group of parents printed selected entries and posted them along the school fence under laminated covers. Children stopped to read them. Some even recognized their own names or their parents. One note read, "March 22nd, 1997, Jacob wore the same socks all week. Gave him a clean pair in his desk, wrapped with a bow. He acted like it was Christmas." Next to it, someone taped a current photo of Jacob, now a Navy officer, standing tall in uniform. The school decided to name a new reading space in her honor. They called it Mabel's Quiet Corner. No bronze plaques, just a bookshelf, a soft chair, and a wall filled with quotes from the notebook. Mabel visited once. She didn't sit, but she smiled. At the end of that school year, the notebook was returned to her, gently rebound with fresh cloth and gold-lettered initials. MJ. She placed it back on the same shelf, wrapped it again in an old shirt, then picked up her broom and stepped back outside. The children were waiting, and she had a sidewalk to sweep. It was a Friday morning in early February. Bitter cold, the kind that made metal groan and breath hang frozen in the air. Mabel Jenkins arrived at Jefferson Elementary at 5:28 a.m., as she always did. She paused at the corner, staring at the sidewalk covered with last night's dusting of snow. Her broom leaned against the fence. Her gloves were thinner this winter. She hadn't bothered to replace them. Her scarf, once bright red, had faded to a muted rust. She bent to pick up a child's mitten lying near the gate. It was blue with a small dinosaur stitched into the cuff. That's when it happened. The dizziness hit first. A strange, tilting wave in her head, like the world had shifted to one side. She clutched the fence post. Then her knees gave way. Her body crumpled slowly, quietly, like a coat falling from a hook. And for the first time in 32 years, Mabel Jenkins did not stand. Malik was the first to find her. He was a junior teacher now, one of Mabel's babies from long ago. The same boy who once cried on the curb when his mom forgot to pick him up. He always arrived early to grade papers and warm up the classroom. That morning, he spotted her through the icy fog from across the street. Her body curled beside the school gate, broom lying nearby like it had fallen mid-sweep. He dropped everything. "Mama Mabel," he shouted, bolting across the pavement. Her breathing was shallow, but steady. Her lips were blue. A scrape on her cheek was bleeding. By 6:05, the school nurse and principal were kneeling beside her. By 6:20, paramedics had arrived. By 6:45, Mabel was in an ambulance on the way to Mount Sinai. And by 7:15, word had spread. The school day changed without announcement. No bells rang. No morning announcements. Children whispered in hallways. Teachers moved with tight jaws and glassy eyes. Someone brought her broom inside and laid it gently in the front office. A second grader left a drawing on her usual corner by the gate. A picture of Mabel with angel wings, holding a golden broom. By noon, dozens more had followed. That afternoon, Principal Hollins gathered the entire school on the playground. He didn't stand on a podium. He didn't use a microphone. He just spoke. "Some of you know her as Mama Mabel," he began. "Some of you knew her as the lady who gave you candy, or warm tea when you were sick, or just a smile when nobody else saw you." He paused, swallowing hard. "Mabel is in the hospital. She collapsed this morning. She's resting now and she's safe. But this is the first morning, since many of your parents were children, that she hasn't swept these steps. He looked out at the crowd, students clutching one another, staff holding back tears. This school was built in 1964, but I don't believe it became a school until the day she picked up that broom. In the days that followed, the sidewalk remained unswept. No one dared touch it. Instead, students placed flowers along the path one by one. Some brought old notes she'd written them. Others tied ribbons to the fence. Red ones, like the one she used to wrap around her broom. Tamara came back from out of state and spent a full day reading to first graders in the hallway. Darius led a silent circle each morning at dawn, sitting beside her usual spot. Miguel delivered food to the school staff, even though he wasn't employed there anymore. Everyone gave something, because now they realized what she had given them. Meanwhile, in room 307 of Mount Sinai's East Wing, Mabel slowly opened her eyes. She hated hospitals, hated the smell, the white walls, the beeping machines, but she stayed quiet, listened. When the nurse came in to adjust her for, Mabel asked just one question. Did they find the mitten? The nurse blinked. Excuse me? Mabel smiled weakly. The dinosaur one. That evening, Malik arrived with a plastic bag. Inside, one small blue mitten, and a note signed by every student at Jefferson Elementary. Please get better. We need you more than we ever knew. Mabel didn't speak much those first few days. Her body was healing, but her mind was elsewhere. She'd never been away from the school this long, never missed a morning. She stared at the ceiling and thought about the cracks in the concrete at the front gate, the way the leaves blew east in March, the sound of Malik's footsteps when he was 10, the smell of chalk and cold air on the first day of school. She missed it like a mother misses her child. On the 5th day, she asked for her notebook. The nurse brought it, and Mabel began writing again. Her hands trembled, her vision blurred, but her memory was as sharp as ever. It was a Tuesday morning in late March when Mabel Jenkins returned to Jefferson Elementary. She stepped out of the car slowly, leaning on a cane the doctor insisted she carry, though she called it a stick with too much personality. Her coat was buttoned as always, her scarf tied tight beneath her chin. The air was crisp, the sun already warming the sidewalk. Malik stood beside her, one hand ready to steady her, but he didn't rush her. This your pace now? He asked gently. Mabel gave a soft chuckle. This is my queenly pace. They reached the corner of the block and she paused. She expected to see the usual. Trash blowing across the curb, leaves stuck in the gate, gum wrappers under the bench near the fence. She expected to sweep, but what she saw stopped her cold. The entire sidewalk had been swept clean. Not just clean, spotless. There were no leaves, no wrappers, no dirt gathered in the cracks of the cement. And along the fence, tied with bright ribbons, were dozens of handmade signs. Welcome back, Mama Mabel. We swept for you. She never missed a morning, now we won't either. Each was signed by students in crayon, marker, glitter glue. Some included tiny illustrations. Mabel with her broom, hearts floating from her hands, her iconic scarf billowing like a cape. She blinked quickly. Lord have mercy. As they reached the gate, Principal Hollins greeted her with a warm hug. We've been counting down the days. You let them make a fuss like this? She grumbled. They asked to. Every single one of them. He gestured to the right side of the entrance, where a small glass case had been mounted on the wall. Inside, resting on a velvet cloth, was her original broom. It had been carefully cleaned and restored. The red ribbon around the handle had been replaced with a fresh one, tied neatly in a bow. Below it, a plaque read, "She never missed a morning. Until we missed her." Mabel swallowed hard. I didn't say you could retire my broom. You didn't have to. As she walked slowly down the corridor, students lined the halls, some holding flowers, others holding up signs. Many simply stood in silence, their eyes shining. A first grader stepped forward and handed her a folded paper. I swept the whole hallway, he said proudly. Even under the water fountain. Bet you found all kinds of mischief down there. She smiled. He nodded. I found a gum wrapper, a penny, and a crayon cap. Then you've done real work, she said. In the library, an entire corner had been transformed. Where once there were mismatched beanbags and half-empty shelves, now stood a freshly painted wall covered in quotes from her notebook. "You're not invisible. I see you. You're not broken. You're growing. Even on your loud days, I'm proud of you." Above the wall was a wooden sign carved by a local artist. Mabel's quiet corner. On a small table below sat an open journal. Next to it, a sign, "Leave a note for someone who needs kindness." Mabel ran her hand across the edge of the journal. "Did you start this?" she asked Malik. He shook his head. "The kids did. They call themselves the Broom Club." "The what?" "The Broom Club. They take turns sweeping the sidewalk, holding the door for others, writing anonymous notes of encouragement. They made their own vests and everything. No adults told them to. They just did it." Mabel looked around at the faces in the room. Children of all shapes, all sizes, all stories. "You know," she said softly, "maybe I've been planting seeds this whole time." "You have," Malik replied. "You just didn't stop long enough to notice them growing." Later that day, after the students had returned to class, Mabel sat outside on the bench near the gate, her cane resting beside her, eyes scanning the sidewalk. A light breeze picked up a stray napkin and tumbled it toward her. Before she could even move, a fourth grader ran up, caught it midair, and dropped it into the trash with a grin. "Got it, Mama Mabel," he said. "You can rest." She nodded. "Thank you, baby." He ran back into the building. And for the first time in her life, Mabel leaned back and allowed herself to do nothing. Not because there was no work to be done, but because it had already begun without her. That evening, after she returned home, Mabel opened her notebook and added a new entry. March 28, 2017. Didn't need to sweep today. Saw my reflection in 47 little pairs of hands. She paused, pen hovering, then added, "Maybe legacy isn't what you leave behind. Maybe it's what walks beside you when you're still here." It was an ordinary Thursday in late April, warm enough for t-shirts but still cool in the shade. Mabel Jenkins had just finished her usual route along the Jefferson Elementary sidewalk. Though her broom had been retired to a glass case inside the school, she still came each morning, walking the perimeter with her cane, making sure everything and everyone was as it should be. She was resting on the bench near the gate, her legs stretched out, when she saw the boy. He was new, small, skinny in a way that made his shirt hang unevenly. His backpack was nearly twice the size of his torso. He stood near the gate like he didn't know whether to walk in or turn back. His fingers fidgeted with the strap of his bag. A security guard, a young man recently assigned to the school, stepped out of the vestibule, one hand resting near his hip, posture stiff. "You can't loiter here, kid," the guard barked. "If you're not a student, you need to leave." The boy didn't answer. His eyes were wide. Mabel stood up. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't rush. She just walked, slow and steady, between them. "That your name on the tag, baby?" she asked gently, pointing to the paper ID badge stuck to the boy's chest. He looked down, nodded once. "Pre-K?" she asked. He nodded again. "First day?" His lips trembled. My brother was supposed to bring me." Mabel turned to the security guard. "He's just early. Not loitering. And that tone you used, it ain't fit for no child who's still figuring out which way his backpack goes." The guard looked embarrassed. "Sorry, ma'am. I didn't know." "Now you do," she said, with a kindness that cut deeper than any scolding. She turned back to the boy and took his hand. "Come on. Let's get you a sticker and a juice box before the bell." And just like that, the moment passed. Except, someone had been recording. A mother on the sidewalk across the street had caught the entire exchange on her phone. She hadn't meant to. She'd just been filming her own daughter's walk to school when the commotion drew her lens toward the gate. That night, she uploaded the 47-second clip to Facebook with the caption, "The woman with the cane just taught us all how to be better humans." By morning, it had over 250,000 views. By noon, it had been shared by multiple city influencers and teachers' unions. By the next evening, it had been picked up by the local news under the headline, "Elderly Harlem School Volunteer Goes Viral for Powerful Act of Kindness." And by Monday, reporters were waiting at the school gate with cameras and questions. Mabel, of course, was not impressed. "Why are they pointing that flashlight at my face?" she asked Hollins, squinting at a camera crew. "It's called a ring light," he replied, barely hiding a grin. "It's called unnecessary." They asked her for interviews, for statements, for feature pieces. She turned them all down. "I ain't doing anything new," she said. "They just never bothered looking before." But the world was looking now. Letters began pouring in, handwritten notes from children and adults all over the city, some from other states. One read, "When I was 5, someone like you helped me. I forgot to thank her, so I'm thanking you instead." Another, "I showed the video to my staff during a workplace training. I told them, this is how you show grace." A week later, the mayor's office called. They wanted to give her a citation for outstanding contribution to the moral fabric of the city. Mabel rolled her eyes. "Tell them I contribute better when I'm not stuck at some fancy banquet." Eventually, they compromised. The city installed a bench with her name engraved in bronze. It sat just outside the school gate, shaded by the old maple tree. The inscription read, "To the one who swept our streets, our sadness, and our silence." She sat there only once. "Too much fanfare," she mumbled, though she didn't stop rubbing her fingers over the letters. The boy she helped that day. His name was Elias. He ended up becoming one of the most popular kids in his class. He wore superhero socks and called Mabel Captain Sweeper. Every morning, he ran straight to her to show her his newest sticker. On her birthday in May, he gave her a handmade card. On the front, a broom with a cape. Inside, "You saved my first day." She added it to the notebook. The viral fame faded as viral things do, but the impact didn't. New volunteers came to the school, retired nurses, veterans, college students. Each had a story about how they'd seen the video, or read the quote, or remembered a woman in their own childhood who reminded them of Mabel. One of them said, "She's not famous because of the video. She's famous because she's real." Another whispered, "She doesn't even know what she started." But Mabel did know, and she kept showing up. Because legacy isn't made in a single moment. It's made in the thousands of small ones that come after. The final school bell of the year rang on a warm June afternoon, and Jefferson Elementary emptied like a river breaking into smaller streams. Children raced down the steps, shouting goodbyes, clutching report cards, their voices carrying into the sunlit streets of Harlem. Mabel Jenkins sat on the bench near the front gate, her cane resting beside her, watching them scatter. She wasn't sweeping anymore. The broom inside the glass case had retired her from that duty, but she still came each day to witness. Witness the laughter. Witness the growth. Witness the world as it unfolded, one small kindness at a time. That day, though, something felt different. The air carried a quiet that she couldn't name. A feeling, soft and heavy, like the pause between heartbeats. She waited until the last teacher locked the doors and the last parent waved from the corner. Then she stood, slowly, and walked toward the school garden, the same patch of earth where the children had once planted flowers in her honor. The garden was bursting now. Lavender, sunflowers, marigolds, and daisies swaying gently in the breeze. Wind chimes, tied by small hands to the branches of the nearby maple tree, tinkled softly. She stopped, and then she heard it, the sound of laughter, faint, distant, but unmistakable. She turned. No one was there. The playground was empty, the building silent, yet the laughter remained, layered with the echoes of long-ago voices. "Morning, Mama Mabel. Can I sweep with you? Thanks for the candy. Did you see my drawing?" It wasn't eerie. It wasn't strange. It was beautiful. Mabel closed her eyes. She saw Miguel, small and scared, sitting behind the fence on that first day. She saw Andrew, angry and lost, holding the crumpled note from his locker. She saw Tamara, stubborn and proud, with a lopsided scarf in her hands. She saw Darius, silent but brave, slipping a paper drawing into her palm. She saw Selena behind the dumpster, whispering thank you through tears. And then she saw them all, grown now, living lives they once thought impossible. Doctors, teachers, artists, soldiers, parents, all carrying a piece of her with them. Her legs trembled slightly as she reached into her bag and pulled out the notebook. Its pages were worn, edges curled from years of use. Inside, the ink told the story of hundreds of children. Some remembered, some forgotten by everyone else except her. She flipped to the last page. Her hand shook as she wrote, June 12, 2018. I think I can rest now. The broom is in good hands. She closed the notebook. As she sat on the bench, the late afternoon light spilling gold across the schoolyard, Malik appeared. He had been looking for her. You didn't come inside, he said. Didn't need to, she replied with a smile. I've seen all I came to see. Malik sat next to her. They're planning something big for you next year. The board wants to dedicate. Don't need my name carved anywhere. She interrupted gently. It's already here. She tapped her chest, then gestured to the garden, to the school, to the children's voices fading in the distance. Malik's throat tightened. You've done more for this community than anyone can measure. She chuckled softly. You measure kindness by how it keeps going when you're not around. That's enough. They sat together in silence for a while, the wind brushing the leaves, the sun dipping lower. Mabel handed Malik the notebook. Hold on to it, she said. Read it when you forget why you're here. He hesitated. What about you? She smiled, eyes glimmering. I don't need to read it. I lived it. As dusk settled, Mabel stood. She looked around the schoolyard one last time. The cracks in the sidewalk. The paint chipped from the fence. The old swing set still squeaking. It was all so ordinary. And yet it was everything. She took one step, then another, her cane tapping softly against the ground. At the edge of the block, she turned back. The wind shifted, carrying a swirl of petals across the steps. For a moment, it looked like the wind itself was sweeping. She smiled. Guess you've got it from here, she whispered. The next morning, Jefferson Elementary woke to find a single folded note placed on the bench with her name on it. It was written in Mabel's careful, looping script. Don't look for me. Look for each other. That's where I'll be. Beside the note was a fresh broom with a red ribbon tied around its handle. The children gathered around it like it was a torch being passed. Malik read the note aloud, voice breaking. No one spoke for a long time. Then a fourth grader, the same one who once caught the stray napkin, picked up the broom. Who's sweeping today? He asked. One by one, hands went up. And so the broom never rested. Every morning someone, student, parent, teacher, showed up early to sweep the steps, just as Mabel had done. They called it the morning promise. The city never saw her leave. But if you passed Jefferson Elementary on a bright summer day, you might still feel her presence. In the rustle of the garden flowers, in the laughter echoing off the walls, in the way the wind seemed to know her name.